So Clive Bundy eventually had it with them and sent them a letter firing them, just like you would a contractor. If you had hired a contractor, didn't do the job, is you're gonna warn them, and then you're gonna fire them. So that's what he did. He offered that money to the state of Nevada to handle that. The state of Nevada wouldn't take it, and so he accumulated the checks all along that he had sent off to them, and still has them. And but he was still holding to the original agreement. Then he took over back what they've been doing for 140 years, maintaining that property, the conservation of that property. So really, if you want to think about it, it's the state of Nevada, I mean the federal government actually probably owes Clive Bundy and his family a fee for doing the job that they were in fact supposed to do. So the BLM came in this last go round, because Clive had been fighting for about 20 years. There's some rumor about some Chinese solar companies. Well, I heard quite a bit about that. Just wait a second. And there's a company that Harry Reid's son is involved with, and they bought some property down the road a ways. These Chinese did that Harry Reid's son negotiated. They paid, I think it was $4.8 million for this property that was appraised at between $28 and $36 million. So Harry Reid's son negotiated this deal with this Chinese company. But the problem with that land is they have the tortoises that are protected on that land the Chinese bought. So what the plan is to move those tortoises from that land onto the Bundy's land, right? That the BLM would then take, right? Once they got rid of the cattle, and that way the Chinese corporation that spent all that money, and God knows how much the Reid family benefited off of that, but they are multimillionaires since Harry's been in the Senate. Yeah. Is then that would relieve that roadblock. I went out on that land. I traveled that, not all of that 600,000 acres, but I traveled up the highest point up there was about 8,700 feet, and I overlooked that whole land, and I was talking to one of their foremen who was, they're married into the family, is Corey Houston. And I said, Corey, I'm looking out, we're on the top of this mountain, and I said, how big is 600,000 acres? I mean, I'm looking over a vast area, and he goes, that property's about like this. And I was like, wow, I mean, because it went on forever. And well, as we were going on that land, we're traveling with a fellow named Cliff. He was a rancher, had been a rancher, his family had settled their land in northern Nevada in 1862. And the BLM had done the same thing to his family. They cut his herd down from 700 head down to 100 head because they took the property away that his family had an agreement with them for. And as we were riding, Cliff told me, he says, Jerry, because we got to talking the whole way, he's a really good guy, he's probably in his 70s, maybe his 80s. And he says, you know, the BLM told me if I put my cattle out on that land, because I only got 100 head left, he says that they're going to throw me in prison, federal prison for the rest of my life. And he said, if I let my cattle go, will you help me? And I said, yeah, we will, Cliff. Yeah, we will. I said, you count on it. So he told me, he says it was going to be a few weeks, and he was planning on letting his cattle go, and taking that chance. I'm still waiting to hear from him. And they settled that property in 1862. 1862, mind you. And this is what's been happening, is the government's been running these people off, because it's not our land anymore. If you think federal land is our land, even though we are the government, right? We're the people, it's not. They're controlling it for their interests. And they're using it for their interests. And they're killing the farmer. This is Agenda 21 on steroids. We have no idea. I mean, we followed Agenda 21 here in smaller scale areas where we're thinking about it. But when you're out there, you're talking hundreds and hundreds of thousands of acres of property that the government's doing Agenda 21 with. If we don't, when I traveled out on that land, I got to back up a little bit. As I found, when I was with Corey, he took me to where there was a pen, like a round pen for horses, but it was small. It was a containment pen that the BLM had set up. And so Jerry says, look at this mark right here in the middle. It was a scratch mark in the ground. He goes, let's follow that. We're on the four-wheeler. So off we go. There were four of us in there. And the four-wheeler, and Cliff, the old rancher, being the one sitting next to me in the back. We followed it for about a mile and a quarter, mile and a half. And that is a drag mark, that's what it was. Skid. It was just right out in the middle of the desert from this pen. Well, out there was one of the prize breeding bulls of the Bundys with a bullet right between his eyes. They had shot it in that pen, roped it up or chained it up, and drug it out because they didn't want anybody to see what they had done, and dropped it out in the desert to rot, which it was. And then we went out, we were out further out, I found another one. It looked like, I'm not sure, one of the guys thought they might have hit it from the air, and it was definitely like M16 small caliber rounds. It had rounds all through its head and its horns, the other bull. And you could go up to their bulls like this and walk up to their cattle. Their cattle, they'd run away from you. They wouldn't charge you. They're really friendly because the Bundys are really gentle people. And they know them all their cattle. Then we went, and it took us a couple tries to get through where the BLM had their major staging area. And they had a big staging area, hay, and they had heads, and they had their trailers, and the whole 9 yards. Right behind it, maybe 25, 30 yards, was a grave. And being a history buff, watching what happened in World War II by the Nazis with the others, this is the size, I don't know if you can see it, but this is Ryan Bundy, who was, I consider, a good friend of mine, in this grave. You can see how tall it is. This is how tall he is, and this thing is quite wide.
Big man too.
And I can pass this around. And it was a decent man. That whole family is a decent family. What we did is they had hooked up and got a small excavator out there for a few hours. So you could see the back of a steer's back hanging out of the hole. The grave was partially filled in. And so they took the excavator, started digging. I brought 2 camera crews with me, 2 private camera crews that were out on site, and they filmed it. The women were crying and the cameramen were throwing up. And out of that grave, I don't have a bunch of pictures of it, but this one here, you can kind of see the head, which is, you can see the mouth and some of the legs, but there were, the hooves ended up sticking out of the ground. They picked one of them up. They'd all been shot, picked them up, because I identified the bullet holes in their head for myself. And taking them out of the grave, and we only pulled 4 of them out of that grave because we ran out of time with the excavator. But we assumed that there are more graves around because they're still missing more cattle. And when the BLM had come in and separate and taken over the land that the Bundys had been raising their cattle on for 140 years, they came in at the calving season, which is a real critical season for those of you who don't know how that works. Is that the cows had just had their babies. And then they separated the cows from the babies, and the cows were all in milk, full udders, and the babies were left out there to die. The ones that they caught, they put into containment pens that the water, the ones that did have water, that the water troughs was too tall for the calves to be able to reach. So the calves couldn't reach them, so they'd just die of lack of water. And the cows, the mothers, with not being able to get rid of their milk, in fact, get into there's an illness that comes from that. They were suffering through that. And you can see the cows out wandering through there looking for their calves. They're looking around, and it was horrific, horrific. And these same people who did this are the same people who had their sniper rifles trained on the Bundy grandchildren and great-grandchildren and the women at the Bundy's house. That when I was at their house, their kids were playing in the creek, and Carol Bundy, Flagon's wife, came out and she gave me a hug on the porch and goes, "Jerry, this is the first time we felt safe." And this was like after we'd been there about a week. And then one of his daughters, or daughter-in-laws, I'm not sure which one she was, you could hear the kids playing in the little spillway, splashing, just little kids laughing and giggling. And she's crying, and she hugs me. And she goes, "This is the first time those kids have been able to play and laugh in this creek. Thank you guys, because without you, we might all be dead." It was moving. It was, and this is what happens when we don't stand. When our government gets out of control and we go back like the Jews did in Nazi Germany and shut our blinds because it's not us and we don't want to look. This is what you get. But eventually it comes to your door. Eventually it comes to all of our doors. And this is why it is so imperative that we as American citizens, that we all stand and support like you guys did, and especially with the prayers. I'm telling you, we had 2 people just give their lives to Christ, and we had a marriage at the Bundy Ranch. we got a question?
Yeah, Jared, thank you. Thoughts, and I've heard everything you've been talking about. The point that I wanted to get to real quick, because I did a lot of research about this, obviously, hearing about the emails from Sue, I've got all of those, followed that very closely. I spent some time on the phone with Sue as well. And in the research that I was doing, the BLM had been reportedly actually pulling up some of these wells with intentions of actually droughting the Bundys off of the land. Now, I don't know if that was hearsay or if that was factual.
I can answer that. I'll stop it right there. I saw that what they did. They cut the water lines, tore the water lines out. They took their water troughs and the tanks that the Bundys had put out there for years, in which they camouflage painted them so that people were looking out at the desert, that they wouldn't be able to tell that the water tanks were there. I mean, they took the time to hand paint them, right? They cut those up with welders and torches and steel, and I saw them. And on top of it is where they drug that first deer I told you about that they shot between the eyes and drug it out there. They backed over one of the tortoise dens where the nests were. I stuck my hand inside of that nest where they had backed over where the tortoise lived and just kept on it going. And that was the BLM and their cowboys.
And they're supposed to be responsible for taking care of that and putting those things in place, but they were just tearing them up in order to drought them off. And furthering in my research that I've been doing, and I want to kind of put the bug in everybody's ear, and this goes to what you were saying about the Chinese buying up some of this land next door, down the street. Some of the research that I've been doing is we are seriously in debt, the country is, and China's holding a lot of that. And what I've actually come to find is that in other countries around the world, they're actually paying their debts back to China by giving them land, their own land, to pay off this debt. And my concern is that our government's going to turn around and say, well, instead of, good honest people want to pay their debts and want to make good on what they have, but honestly, the government is so far in debt for us to just say, if China comes here and says, oh, it's time to pay your debt, for us to say, well, come and take it, that I think they're actually going to just start levying our lands to them. Here, come build your plants, come build your solar fields, and man your military here to guard that right here on our back steps. So, but I don't know how many people are aware of other countries doing this, but my bug to put in everybody's ear here is that is a very real possibility that we may end up start paying our debts back with our land, and that's not okay.
They're already holding the deed to many of our national monuments, so it's already too late. They're already doing that.
They don't want our money anymore because it's useless, it's worthless. Land will always retain value.
And also what's in that
Can I
ground.
just say something quick?
Yeah.
It won't be good. I just have to say this. I found out through all this that I'm not bragging, I'm just stating a fact. And I just want you to know that it's coming from my heart and from every bit of my being. I found out that not only did my ancestors fight in the Revolution and Civil War and everything, that one of them was the commanding Brigadier General of the Massachusetts Militia. And what these men, fought for our freedom. They set up a constitution because they knew that man was evil, and they knew that man basically was they're psychopaths when they get in power. And when they set up the constitutional structure, they set it up to empower at the local level. Right. And I'm old enough to remember being a little kid in New Hampshire when it was the government that took away the dairy farms. And I remember there were farmers, some of them committed suicide, and they were very upset because they didn't know what to do, and a lot of them said it was the end of America. And I didn't know what they meant back then, but now I'm starting to understand. If you look at what the communists did, when they collectivized the Soviet Union, Stalin had it in for the Ukrainians, which was the breadbasket of the Soviet Union. If you want to know who went to the gulags, it was the farmers from the Ukraine, and a lot of them starved to death. And that's what. But the other thing is, when Alger Hiss, before he was a communist spy for the U.S. State Department and setting up the United Nations, because he was part of that, and he went to prison for lying about it. He was part of the Department of Agriculture. And this is where you get this history, and it's more, and this is where you get the start of Agenda 21, it happened way back.
I'd like to make a point is there's been a deafening silence about the Secretary of Agriculture. Because who authorized all of this? Yeah, I mean, they focus on the militia guys, which I'm not a militia guy. And it's funny because every time I get interviewed, they think, oh, you're head of the militia. I'm not a militia guy, I'm a 912 guy. And then I heard all about it about Beck. Well, why isn't Beck supporting? Which I tried to actually goad him into coming out there, but it didn't work. What I did find is that this is nationwide. This is, and I think that one of the largest lessons I took out of this is that if we stand with those people who are in trouble, it empowers others to stand.
Right.
Other people, I heard story after story after story of others who were in the same situation as the Bundys, some even worse. And those people now feel that they're safe for them to stand, that they're not alone, because they felt separated by our government. And as long as we have people like this, and I'll start here and go around this room, is we can empower America to take back their country.
I just want to say something to everybody who's here tonight before we adjourn, and I don't know how much longer this is going to run because we're like way over our time. But I just want you all to know that I know every single one of you have been supportive of this, of me, of the patriots that went out there, and it's in your hearts. And I cannot thank you enough, but I know how you all feel. And it's really important that we continue to have that lion's heart, and that we have to do what Jerry and these guys are talking about. Be ready to go. Realize we've got problems in this country, big, huge problems, but thank you from me and these guys. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for everything that you've done, for every prayer that you said, for every penny that you donated, for every time you thought about these guys out there, and thank you for staying the course and coming every single month and trying to do whatever it is that you can do to affect us being able to recapture this country that belongs to us. And I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you.
Jeremy, I just wanted to say, is there a way for us to get this meeting and all the truth that you've shared with us tonight on the national media, not the mainstream media, but, get it out there on the blogs and get it out there on Facebook?
We've got the best blogger in the world here.
Well, we've got Ed, and we've got Skip here, and they'll put it out. There is a pretty cool video, and I don't want to self-promote, but Alex and I were in it, and it's by Mac Ruiz, R-U-I-Z. It's called The Battle of Bunkerville. If you didn't see it,
You made me cry, Jerry.
it was actually pretty touching. And when Mac came out, he's a lib, right? And he was trying to paint another picture. He told me that, and because he wasn't sure about what was going on out there. And I talked to him probably for about an hour. And he came up and he was crying, and he says, "You've changed my heart. Now I understand." And then he had talked with Alex, who did an outstanding job, and also the Bundys and all. But that's really worth seeing if you haven't seen it. It'll explain a lot. There's a couple things I want to go over, and there's something really important I want to say, and I'm going to save that for last, and that's you, Billy. One is what we're doing, and I had to brainstorm while we're out there because the need is so great. There's a need for all of us, right, in a supportive role and in an action role to reclaim this country. There is a definite need for it, and there's a calling for it. And I think that under the Constitution, and actually scripturally, I think that we're called to do this. And is what I'm setting up is what's called a quick reaction force, a QRF. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna set up a group of people like this. We're gonna try to set them up around the country. We'll have teams, which will be, the QRF will be made up of QRTs, quick reaction teams, that'll be able to respond to situations like the Bundy. So we'll be able to send out a small team to go out there and do the initial advanced work, and then if we need to bring more people in, to bring more people in fact, to defend their rights. This is a huge endeavor, and it's not going to make me real popular with the federal government, and I don't give two shits about it, to be perfect. We are going to stand. We are going to stand. If we don't stand for anything, we'll fall for anything, right? What I'm proposing is what we're going to need is we're going to need funds, because these people are going to have to earn a living while they're doing it, and we're going to have to also feed them and clothe them, and they're probably already pretty much armed up, and but they're in transportation as well. I mean, because it was a huge expense, as I won't even get into how much it cost for this one. I want to tell Sue is that it was huge. It was a huge endeavor for us, and but the money's only the money. I mean, because to be perfectly frank with you, when we rolled out, as my son Josh was saying, is I wasn't sure if none of us were sure if we were going to roll out into a hot DMZ at that particular point in time. We thought we were going to be probably taking shots when we came in. We had no idea what we were running into. And there was a number of times, at least 3, I believe, that I talked to the group about that this will probably be it. And told them that they could, if they wanted to go, no harm, no foul, and not a man left. The only time we lost anybody is when Stuart Rhodes had a fear of the drones, and I'm not, and don't take me as talking trash about the Oath Keepers as a group, because I'm not. And
there were a lot of outstanding.
Your organization needs a lot of work.
I'd like to add something to that real quick.
Go ahead.
Every Oath Keeper I've ever met in my life in the past 5 years has become a close friend of mine, a real tight patriot, stand-up guys that go out and put their own money out there and go out there on their time off to go out there and rally and spread awareness. And I got to tell you, being in a situation like that, all we could do at the moment was react. And since I've been back, I've been kind of debriefing my own mind. And, we were upset. We were out there and we were abandoned. That's exactly what happened, whether anybody wants to admit it or not. There's a lot of misinformation out there. But what we don't want to do is ruin all the hard work that everybody in that organization has done over the past 5 years, because they've done an incredible amount of work organizing patriots, getting funds, and I don't want to see all that work and the good relationships. He says it's, maybe he panicked. You know what, I have a little more suspect on it, because what this has done is it's driven an incredible wedge in the patriot movement. And I got a few friends here tonight, and we've had some infighting since that. Now, if you want to beat somebody, what do? You divide them up. All right? Now, there's one call from a very small handful of people has driven a wedge between patriots nationwide. And I got friends all over the country now, and I'm trying to smooth things over with people, but you got to understand, we were upset because we were abandoned. We were in the situation, people left us hanging, okay? So we reacted to that, and it may not have been good, and we're trying to kind of cool it down, but as far as the Oath Keeper organization goes, all the people in that organization, they're law enforcement, they're military, they're vets, they're all stand-up guys, they're our friends, okay? And I just want to say that we don't want to see any more infighting. So if you see any of this trash that's out there, people want to throw mud at each other, just keep that in mind, that infighting is dividing us. And if they're going to beat us, that's going to be the first thing they're going to do. So I want to apologize for anything I might have said that might have offended anybody involved with the Oath Keepers, because I did say a few things. I was pissed off, and I had the right to be. But I'm apologizing for it, and I'm being a grown-up about it and moving on. So I just want to make that clear that the Oath Keepers is a great organization. They've done a lot of great work, and I have a lot of personal friends in the Oath Keepers. The leadership needs to change if that organization is going to keep its reputability. Because
I'm an Oath Keeper. I mean, I paid $40 a week before I left, and I got my packet when I got home. And I don't know if they'll let me on the website. John here actually was the reason I joined the Oath Keepers, because of him coming to all our 912 meetings and the Oath Keepers and regard for the group, and because what I thought of the Oath Keepers was what I saw in John, and that to me was admirable. And that was a group. John was somebody worth being around. I knew that. I sensed that right away. I had no idea we were going to end up in Nevada and
war zone,
and standing toe to toe. But that's the way it goes, I guess. Part of what I kind of want to bring this around to is the threat of Agenda 21 and an over tyrannical government, which is what we have right now, as a government that's really trying to take our rights away from us. While we're over in Nevada, right, we're facing down the feds and everybody else and being called a terrorist by Harry Reid, who is a jackass. And as far as I'm concerned, I like to get him within reach because I show him terror. Because he's a traitor.
You terrorized the
He's
guy.
a traitor. He's a traitor to his oath. He's broken his oath. He's called these patriots and the Bundys, for crying out loud, and their grandchildren domestic terrorists. And you know, and we haven't heard a word. We haven't heard a word out of our congressional delegation from New Hampshire or senatorial delegation from New Hampshire about that. And we don't even know. We don't even know if at some point we're going to go to try to buy a firearm or get on a plane, whether we're going to be deemed or the feds could come pick us up under the Patriot Act, because that could happen.
Roch TV.